They were the all-American couple.
Good-looking family, great kids, lived in a great neighborhood.
She was a beautiful school teacher.
Alicia was the total package. She had beauty and brains.
He was a handsome veteran.
One of those type personalities that seemed like everybody loved.
But just when it seemed they were bound for a life of happiness, a hail of gunfire stopped them dead in their tracks.
Please help me, please help me, please help me. Ma'am? Somebody shot my husband.
The shooting sparked a frantic manhunt.
The murder had so many questions and not a lot of answers.
And would ultimately expose a tawdry tale laced with lies, lust, and revenge served up at point-blank range.
It wasn't all sunshine and candy bars.
So many twists and turns.
I was sitting on the edge of my seat, wondering what's gonna happen.
It reminds you of something from a movie.
June 3rd, 2004. It's a quiet summer evening in the upscale Jackson, Mississippi neighborhood of Lakeover.
You're talking about, you know, a middle-class black professional neighborhood.
But at 11:10 p.m., an alarm is triggered at the home of Brian and Alicia Hughes.
It was loud enough and pronounced enough for me to know that something wasn't right.
When no one keys in the code, the security company calls the Hughes residence.
Somebody shot my husband. Please, please, somebody. Okay, ma'am, I'm going to call the police right back. Please, please. Okay.
Officers race to the Hughes residence. Guns drawn, they step inside and find a scene of unimaginable horror.
They found Brian Hughes in the front room. He was actually lying face down on the floor.
A vast pool of blood surrounds Brian. His wife, Alicia, is trembling beside him.
Brian, baby, wake up, please.
She was hysterical, crying, screaming, somebody help my husband. I need some help.
Help me, somebody.
I screamed in vain. It was just unbelievable.
Officers attempt to administer first aid, but it's too late.
He was shot 5 times. The lethal shot entered his chest, and that's what killed him.
63, can you start us a couple of
The major crimes unit is notified, and in a matter of minutes, homicide detectives are there to initiate a sweep of the home. There's no sign of the gunman or the murder weapon, but officers find the couple's 2 young daughters, safe and sound, asleep in their bedroom. It appears the only eyewitness is Brian's wife.
Now, I know you're disturbed, but can you tell me what happened here tonight?
Brian had went out with his brother, and I went to sleep in the room with my daughters, and I heard a pop.
Alicia's statement to the police was that she was sleeping in the bed with her daughters, and then she heard popping sounds.
She heard this pop, pop, pop sound, and she thought it was coming from the air conditioning system in their home.
According to Alicia, that's when the alarm sounded.
She went to turn off the alarm, realized the door was open, closed the door, and as she was walking back, she saw her husband lying in a pool of blood.
Please help me, please help me, please help me.
This was a bad nightmare for Alicia. She lost her husband, kids lost a father.
Brian Lamar Hughes was born in Jackson, Mississippi in 1974. Even as a child, Brian was a natural leader who attracted friends and followers.
Brian was just everybody's friend. You know, you look in the crowd, everybody kind of standing around Brian. That Brian is their boy. You know, he was a very likable person.
In high school, Brian excelled both in the classroom and on the playing field. Also blessed with good looks and personality, he was popular with the girls as well.
Brian was tall, dark, and handsome. Definitely the type of man a woman would find attractive.
But even in high school, Brian was always looking for that one special person.
Hey.
Hey.
That is, until he laid eyes on fellow classmate Alicia Johnson.
So what you up to?
It was the end of class, and he was sitting there, And he was just looking at me.
Wanted to come through and tell you how pretty you were.
He was real spontaneous. He liked to do romantic things.
She was in love with him. Two young folks, who began a relationship as high school sweetheart.
Your first love is exciting. It feels like nobody in the world understands or can possibly imagine how you're feeling.
After high school, Brian and Alicia followed each other to nearby Jackson State University. But their newfound freedom and a sea of young co-eds quickly put their love for each other to the test.
They were still figuring out who they were, what they wanted, and Brian still had the desire to play around.
He was just a young man feeling his oats. I think Brian was into a lot of things.
Alicia and Brian ultimately decided to see other people. Shortly after that, Brian dropped out and enlisted in the Air Force.
Brian and Alicia's relationship was rocky in their 20s. It was on again, off again.
While Brian was in the Air Force, Alicia earned a master's degree in education and landed a teaching job at a local elementary school. Even though she dated other men during this time, Alicia still had a soft spot in her heart for Brian.
He was a good guy. He had a way about him where he could make you feel special, without really even trying.
And after 4 years in the Air Force, Brian returned to Jackson.
After the military, he came back home, and he followed in his father's footsteps and started working at Delphi Packard Electric.
What?
What you doing?
I'm washing dishes. What do you think?
But it wasn't just the job Brian came home for.
What you want me to do? Start right here?
You better stop.
There were still that young flame that was still going for each other, and they were able to rekindle that fire.
Brian and Alicia's desire for one another had never burned hotter. And this time, their passionate reunion was life-changing.
They were in love. That was her soulmate.
When Brian and Alicia hooked back up together, they were looking to build a life with each other and live that happily ever after together.
In the fall of 1999, almost a decade after they first started dating, Alicia and Brian welcomed the birth of their first child. 8 months later, they married.
So I just wanted to be, a good wife, a good mom, and good at what I did.
With the couple making good money, they bought and renovated a home in the charming middle-class neighborhood of Lakeover.
They're moving into this great neighborhood. It's like, wow, they're doing it right.
The couple had even more to celebrate when Alicia gave birth to another baby girl in 2001.
They have these great kids. You think they're just, building a great life for themselves and just living the American dream.
Which makes the nightmarish scene police encounter inside the Hughes residence all the more tragic.
Everybody was shocked that this thing could even have occurred to these two people.
But who would want to kill Brian Hughes? And why?
Still trying to piece of this.
As investigators dig deeper, a strange theory about the crime emerges. One that would shock everyone who'd ever known this seemingly storybook couple.
It's a true whodunit. And then when the story started to unravel, there was an even bigger mystery there.
High school sweethearts Brian and Alicia Hughes had gone their separate ways, only to reunite after college and reignite their red-hot romance.
Brian and Alicia were definitely a power couple. They seemed like the perfect romantic love story.
But that love story is ripped apart when police respond to a shooting at the Hughes residence and find Brian's body riddled with gunshot wounds.
It seemed like a mystery. No one knew exactly what happened on that night of June the 3rd, 2004.
A stunned Alicia tells police that she'd fallen asleep in her daughter's room, only to awake to the sound of what she thought was a noisy air conditioner. That's when the alarm sounded.
The door's open, the alarm system is going off. She goes into the front room and sees that her husband's been shot, and bleeding out everywhere.
It was surreal. It was like an out-of-body experience. You feel so inept.
You just start thinking like, wow, this poor woman, this happens to her husband and with her kids in the house.
Please help me, please help me.
As detectives console Alicia, officers begin processing the scene.
Were there any signs of forced entry?
No, sir. We checked all the doors and windows. If they came in, they had to come in through the front.
Okay, thank you.
But on the front porch, they find evidence that suggests the attack on Brian began near the door.
There were 3 shell casings outside the door.
In the den, police recover 3 more shell casings, which suggest a total of 6 rounds were fired, and all but 1 made contact with their target.
This murder was pretty brutal. Brian was shot multiple times, so whoever shot him definitely wanted him dead.
Just outside the couple's home, detectives noticed something else.
There were skid marks in the street right in front of the residence.
Somebody had a car sitting outside. They went up there and shot him. He got back in the car and sped away.
Between the shell casings, the skid marks, and the home's location in the upscale Lakeover neighborhood, authorities wonder if Brian has been the victim of a deadly robbery.
When I first heard about it, I thought that it was someone from the outside came in and committed the murder. Jackson has more murders than it should have. I thought it could have been a burglary gone bad.
But as they continue to search the residence, detectives realize there's a problem with that theory.
There was no sign of forced entry into the home. They didn't take anything.
As the mystery deepens, news of Brian's murder spreads through Jackson like wildfire.
My mom calls my phone, hysterical, crying. He's dead, Brian is dead. Brian is dead. They shot him and they killed him.
First thing I thought about, the 2 little girls. They don't have a daddy no more. And that made me mad. He was young.
Grieving friends and family soon converge on the Hughes residence. Police try to be sympathetic while preserving their crime scene.
Sir, we're still trying to piece the investigation together. Just hold tight, because we will have some questions for you later on.
The Hughes family was like a prominent family here in Jackson. The police allowed certain folks in the house, especially both relatives of Alicia Hughes and relatives of Brian Hughes, into the house that night.
Her family was there. A lot of people were there. Everybody was upset.
But no one seems more upset than Brian's wife.
Alicia's distraught. She can hardly speak. Understandably so, she's very, very upset.
I didn't want to be there. It was so difficult. It was just unbelievable.
In fact, Alicia is so distraught, she's of little use to detectives.
Listen, she's too upset, man. We're not going to get any information from her today.
Yeah, I agree. Let's cut her loose. We'll talk to her in the morning.
A person in authority made the call to talk to her at a later time.
You got somewhere you can go with the kids?
Yeah.
Come on, we'll get you out.
Alicia packs an overnight bag, gathers her 2 girls, and heads to her mother's house. Meanwhile, detectives question friends and family gathered at the scene.
What's your name, sir?
Willie Hughes.
And who are you in relation to the victim?
I was his brother.
Can you tell me where you were tonight?
We just went out to grab a few drinks. We got some fast food, and I dropped him off, and that was the last time I saw him.
They had been out, having a good time. He dropped off his brother that night.
Think maybe somebody followed him home, rang the doorbell, and he let him in?
That may explain the unforced entry.
And the shell casings outside.
Investigators float this theory by Brian's family, but they find it hard to believe Brian would answer the door for anyone at such a late hour.
If you didn't call, and if you just go to the door and knock or ring the doorbell, he would not answer the door.
So if Brian wouldn't answer the door for a stranger, was it possible he knew his attacker? The answer to that question would scandalize all of Jackson, and in the process reveal a dark side to Brian and Alicia's romance that few had ever seen. The fairy tale romance of Brian and Alicia Hughes has ended in a flurry of gunfire.
Baby, wake up, please.
We're talking about just 2 great individuals, loving relationship, great, perfect family. And having gone through this was terrible.
Shell casings collected at the scene suggest Brian was initially shot near the front door. Then again in the living room.
They were of the belief that someone, an outsider, broke in, obviously, because the alarm went off, and shot Mr. Hughes from that doorway.
But the lack of forced entry suggests Brian willingly let the shooter into his and Alicia's home. If that was the case, who was this mysterious acquaintance Brian allowed inside? And what sinister desires compelled them to murder him in cold blood? The one person who might help investigators answer that question is Brian's wife, Alicia. But the horror of discovering her husband's dead body has seemingly left Alicia too distraught to be of any use. And a few hours after the murder, detectives allow Alicia and her children to leave the scene and spend the night with some relatives. By the following morning, Alicia is ready to talk.
Good morning, Alicia. I just want to start off by thanking you for coming in this morning. I know you're distraught. I know it's a trying time. But I just wanted to ask you, is there anybody who would want to hurt Brian?
No. Everybody loved him.
Do you think you could walk us through the events of last night again?
Yeah, just put the girls to bed. And so I fell asleep.
Her story never changed, that she heard a loud popping or something.
I thought it was the air conditioning system, so I got up.
She said she went in the front room, and there she said she found her husband dead, lying on the floor.
Then the alarm company called and I answered the phone.
Though Alicia's statement doesn't get investigators any closer to cracking the case, it does seem to dovetail with evidence collected at the scene and allows them to essentially rule her out as a possible suspect. But before they release her, detectives ask Alicia to submit to a gunshot residue test.
It's just standard procedure.
Sure.
Oh, we'll see you out.
The detectives
After
did
a
not
quick dusting
think
of her hands,
that she was a
she is
suspect.
free to go.
Thank you, ma'am.
So
They let her
who did
go.
have the opportunity
The
and the
detectives
motive to
did
pull
not
off this
think
brutal attack?
that she was a suspect.
So who did have the opportunity and the motive to pull off this brutal attack?
It's one of those situations where, dead men can't talk.
Perhaps, but maybe the dead man's autopsy could.
Brian was shot in several areas. He was shot in the chest area, in the arm, in the thigh area. What was interesting about one of those shots, he was shot near the groin area.
It just makes you wonder what was really going on and what led to that. Was it a crime of passion? Was it rage?
It's an interesting question. Brian is a handsome, charming man who seems to have it all. Is it possible someone murdered him out of jealousy? In an effort to answer that question, investigators interview several of Brian's friends and co-workers.
Fred?
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? Detective Daniels?
Nice to meet you.
This is my partner, Detective Gibson.
Nice to meet you.
In doing so, they unearth a shocking revelation.
Is there anything you can tell us about his lifestyle or shed any information on his life that might help us with this investigation?
I mean, Brian was a good man. He was there for his family, financially, but Brian loved women and women loved Brian. He never had any trouble meeting them.
Oh, so basically, he was a player.
Absolutely.
Many of his co-workers talked about how it was obvious that he was involved with women that he worked with. It was obvious that there was something intimate or romantic going on.
Brian could meet him anywhere because he knew every bar, every club, and he was friends with everybody. Jackson was his palate.
This is completely shocking that Brian, who lives this picture-perfect life, is having an affair.
Fred Clark Jr., a friend of Brian's, also tells police about a conversation he overheard just 2 weeks before Brian's murder.
Well, there was this one time I went over his house.
When I was walking in his front door, he was in this heated argument with this guy on the phone. The guy was cussing. I could hear the cuss words through the phone. And the dude was like saying, "I'm gonna get you."
Show up in my yard if you want to.
And he basically told the person on the phone, F you, do what you gotta do.
You.
What's this all about, man?
He told me his girlfriend had been paying for his cell phone for about 2 years. And the girlfriend was married.
That was a husband on the phone.
Because they found out that he did have other lady friends, of course, anyone that would have been associated with them, the ladies as well as their partners, boyfriends or husbands, would be suspects.
That helps us a lot.
Sure.
Fred Clark's statement got investigators wondering. Had the woman's husband threatened to kill Brian if he didn't stop sleeping with his wife? and had Brian signed his own death warrant by daring the man to make good on it.
Brian is a man. I mean, you're not gonna be intimidated by what another man's saying on the phone.
But who is Brian's mistress? And more importantly, who is the jealous husband? According to Brian's colleagues, the woman's name is Sandra Davis. She's married to Martin Davis, one of Brian's acquaintances. When confronted, Martin doesn't deny he'd recently discovered his wife was sleeping with Brian. Nor does he deny threatening Brian over the phone in a rage. Investigators are suspicious. They subpoena Brian's phone records to see if he'd been in contact with either of the Davises in the days leading up to the murder.
Investigators discovered that right before Brian's murder, that he was speaking to somebody on the phone.
Brian hung up the phone.
Gotta go.
That was about 10 minutes before he was killed.
Could this
was
phone
a
call
bad-
be from
bad
Martin
nightmare
Davis
for her.
or his wife? And is it another heated exchange that led to Brian's murder? In a case already dripping with allegations of infidelity and deceit, the answer to that question would prove more scandalous than investigators ever imagined. The brutal slaying of Jackson, Mississippi native Brian Hughes has taken a bizarre turn. In speaking with friends and coworkers, detectives have learned the dream life Brian was living with his beautiful wife Alicia is a mirage, and that Brian was anything but a model husband.
The extramarital affairs and several women on the side, it just cracks the mirror of what you thought this family was like.
But the allegations of Brian's infidelity have allowed investigators to zero in on a possible suspect, a man named Martin Davis. Martin's wife Sandra had been having a torrid affair with Brian.
The husband threatened the next time he interacts with his wife, he was going to hurt Brian.
You.
A search of cell phone records reveals Brian was on the phone with someone just minutes before he was murdered. Investigators suspect that if that phone number traces back to Martin Davis, then they've likely identified Brian's killer. But it turns out the number isn't registered to Martin Davis, but rather to one Robbie Rayford.
Was a possible jealous husband of one of the women that Brian was having an affair with.
But when investigators pay Robbie Rayford a visit, they're shocked by who greets them.
Hello. Can we speak to Robbie Rayford, please?
I'm Robbie Rayford. This Robbie person, whom Brian was speaking to before his murder, was actually a girl and not a guy.
Robbie is devastated to learn Brian has been murdered, and she pulls no punches as to why.
We've been sleeping together for 2 years. Brian and I are in love.
She talked about, how they had had relationships. They had had sex, numerous times.
When was the last time you spoke?
A few days ago.
Yeah, just got home.
She said she heard Brian come in, set the alarm system at the house, turn the TV on.
So I come see you tomorrow. I gotta go.
And then he said, I have to go.
Is that unusual?
No, that's our code for my wife is in the room.
Robbie said that was the code word that, she and Brian used to let her know that Alicia was there.
If that's the case, that means that she was there in the living room and possibly during the time that he was killed.
Investigators are floored. Not only does Robbie Rayford's statement call into question Alicia Hughes' version of events, it vaults Alicia to the top of the list of possible suspects.
Maybe she heard him on the phone. He thought she was asleep. He was talking to his girlfriend. She got her gun. She walked into the living room. She pointed the gun at him.
Lie to me one more time.
Come on.
Again and again and again.
Though it's admittedly hard for investigators to imagine the beautiful Alicia Hughes as a vengeful killer.
It just doesn't make sense that this lady, this petite, frail school teacher, would have killed him.
Although investigators can't help but think back to the intensely personal nature of
kids.
Brian's injuries.
You think they're just, building a great life for
If
themselves.
Alicia
And
is-
just the shooter in this case, that groin shot was one that may have been personal for her. If you're gonna cheat on me, here's one for you.
But neither Brian's mortal wounds nor Robbie Rayford's statement are enough to concretely link Alicia to the murder. And forensic evidence collected at the scene still suggests that whoever shot Brian initiated the attack from just outside the front door.
There were 3 shell casings found outside the door on the doorstep. Somebody would have had to been out front shooting the gun.
Investigators decide to revisit the crime scene to see if there's anything they might have missed.
Just doesn't make sense.
There was no traces of blood from the front door to where he was, where his body was found.
There's no blood splatter on the walls or nothing.
All the blood that was found was directly beneath his body on the floor in the living room. He was shot with a .45 caliber handgun. It's a big, large caliber handgun. He was shot 5 times. Somehow, from the foyer to the living room where his body was found, he didn't bleed 1 drop.
If he got shot by a .45, we would have had splatter on the floor, on the walls, or something, but all the blood's right here.
Their theory was that someone actually got those shell casings from the inside and actually placed them on the outside.
If that's the case, then the shooting was initiated by someone inside the home.
Alicia?
And she staged the casings outside.
But what about the tire tracks found outside the couple's home? They suggest someone may have quickly fled the scene. In speaking with one of the Hughes neighbors, that fact is also called into question.
The one that we interviewed never said anything about they heard a car.
We don't know when they were put there. Skid marks can stay on pavement for months and months before they wear off from water and erosion. That's the problem with the skid marks.
The affairs, the blood evidence, Robbie Rayford's statement. It appears the circumstantial evidence now points to Alicia Hughes as her husband's killer. But is jealousy a bona fide motive?
Why couldn't she have just divorced him? If he had all these affairs and she was sick of him fooling around, you get a divorce. She was a school teacher. She had a job. The money's coming every month, so why kill him?
But when they pull Brian and Alicia's financial records, investigators find another clue.
There were 2 life insurance policies. One was $250,000, and I believe there was a small one for around $80,000. And that was gonna go away once they got the divorce. Now, the way that wouldn't go away is if Brian died and she got the life insurance money.
Suspicion only deepens when investigators contact Brian and Alicia's insurance company. It turns out they had received a phone call from Alicia just weeks after Brian's death.
It's pretty shocking for Alicia to be inquiring about the interest that she would be making on her husband's life insurance policy, considering that her husband had been brutally murdered.
Still, without additional physical evidence, investigators have no way of charging Alicia with any crime. Then on February 3rd, 2005, investigators received word from the state crime lab. The results of the gunshot residue test, administered to Alicia almost as an afterthought, have come back positive.
Either you fired a gun, held a gun, or was close to when a gun was fired. Those are the only 3 reasons it would be on the back of your hand.
In addition to the gunshot residue, a deeper background check reveals Alicia had easy access to a gun similar to the murder weapon.
Brian apparently had owned a .45 caliber weapon that could not be found.
Still, one could argue the findings of the gunshot residue test aren't quite a slam dunk.
They only found 1 particle of gunshot residue on the back of her right hand.
But when coupled with the circumstantial evidence, it's enough to charge Alicia Hughes with the murder of her husband. The story is immediate front-page news in Jackson.
It was sensational. It was huge. I mean, you have this picture-perfect couple who were high school sweethearts, the perfect love story that ends in a tragic murder. She can hardly speak, understandably so. She's very, very upset.
I didn't want to be there.
want to.
But nobody claims to be more shocked by Alicia's arrest than Alicia herself.
You always assume that people are going to believe you. And so I always felt like surely they can't consider me because, I've told the truth.
There was intense interest in this case because it had everything. You know, it had the cheating husband. It had the wife accused of shooting her husband.
And as the case heads to trial, it becomes clear that a guilty verdict against this wife and mother turned alleged killer is anything but a done deal. On January 3rd, 2007, Alicia Hughes is escorted into a Jackson, Mississippi courtroom to stand trial for the first-degree murder of her high school sweetheart turned unfaithful husband, Brian. In their opening arguments, prosecutors come out swinging.
That Alicia Hughes, in fact, murdered her husband, Brian Hughes, in cold blood.
I told him exactly how she did it, how she waited for him to come home, how she walked in, how she confronted him, how he was on the phone with Robbie.
I'm sick of you lying to me!
How she shot him.
Lie to me one more time.
After pumping several shots from a .45 into Brian, Alicia allegedly staged the scene to look like an intrusion.
Their theory was that Alicia Hughes got those shell casings from the inside and actually placed them on the outside.
Prosecutors contend Alicia also feigned grief in order to convince police to let her leave the scene, which allowed her to smuggle the murder weapon out of the house in her overnight bag.
I believe this was all premeditated. She planned it. She waited for Brian to come in that night, and then she killed him. She's got two motives. One, the insurance money, and two, an unfaithful husband. You take your pick.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
To support their claim, the state calls Brian's lover, Robbie Rayford, to the stand.
Ms. Rayford, can you please tell the court the nature of your relationship with Mr. Hughes?
We were lovers.
She's up there in front of the whole world, basically saying, I'm Brian's mistress. And she said she loved him, and her exact words were,
He was my soulmate.
Can you tell us about the events of June 3rd?
I was on the phone with him.
Yeah, just got home.
I heard him go in the house, and he says, I have to go.
Gotta go.
Then I asked him, is she in the room? And he said, yeah.
That's when he was shot.
And for the court, can you tell us who she is?
His wife.
Everything Robbie said fit with the physical evidence.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have to know that the physical evidence is not adequate to convict Alicia Hughes.
Alicia's defense team counters by attacking the physical evidence, namely the GSR test.
She had a speck of gunshot residue powder on her hand.
For someone to have shot a .45 caliber pistol 5 or 6 times, there'd be GSR on her hair, there'd be GSR on her face, on her arms. It wouldn't be one single particle.
They can't provide a weapon.
The defense also points out the lack of a murder weapon, which renders their theory about Alicia smuggling it out in her overnight bag mere conjecture.
If she could have done that good, she doesn't need to be here. She needs to be in Hollywood. You know, she's one of the best actresses ever lived.
On January 8th, 2007, 2.5 years after Brian's murder, both sides rest their case.
And you had folks who said they thought Alicia Hughes was guilty. You had a lot of folks on the other side said this sweet teacher couldn't have killed her husband.
2 hours later, the jury returns with its verdict.
The jurors were saying
the detectives did not think that she was a
just over and
suspect.
over again, and I was still
So who did have the
trying to
opportunity
grasp,
and the motive to
onto
pull
that
off this brutal
and
attack?
trying to keep my face straight.
We were in total shock and disbelief. She couldn't believe it.
Alicia Hughes, please stand. Mrs. Hughes, on the charge of murder in the first degree, I am sentencing you to life in prison.
Alicia just stood there like, there's no way.
As she's carted off to the penitentiary, tears flow from both her supporters and Brian's grieving family.
Brian and Alicia had known each other since high school, so these are also two families that had known each other for many years. And to be divided because of a situation like this made it really tough.
But before either side can put this tragedy behind them, they'll be blindsided by an unlikely turn of events that forces everyone to question whether Alicia Hughes was a cold-blooded killer or an innocent woman wrongfully accused.
I was sitting on the edge of my seat, wondering, what's gonna happen.
In January of 2007, Alicia Hughes is convicted of murdering her husband and former high school sweetheart, Brian.
The jury found her guilty of killing her husband. Brian Hughes' family, they believe that justice was served.
But immediately following Alicia's conviction, her attorneys file an appeal, arguing prosecutor Stan Alexander unfairly struck jurors in the selection process on the basis of race and gender.
All you heard was Stan was racist. He didn't want black women on the jury. And it's ridiculous. I'm married to a black woman. My mother's a black woman.
Surprisingly, presiding Judge Winston Kidd grants the appeal, ruling that Alicia's right to a fair trial amongst her peers had been violated, in essence, overturning his own verdict.
It was like just instant relief. It was just absolutely an incredible feeling.
On November 5th, 2007, 9 months after her first trial ended, Alicia Hughes walks back into a Mississippi courtroom to stand trial once again for the murder of her husband, this time with a new panel of jurors. And again, the state argues that the evidence still points to just one person.
After we read the entire book, and not just read the cover, you're going to find out that the story of Alicia Hughes' life is that she's guilty of murder.
Prosecutors also called Brian's lover, Robbie Rayford, to the stand to help corroborate their version of events.
Well, what did those words mean to you when he was at home?
It meant that his wife was in his presence.
As in the first trial, Robbie Rayford's testimony seems to connect the dots of the state's case, particularly as it relates to the blood evidence.
There's no way possible you get shot at the front door with a .45 5 times and don't bleed until you get back to the living room floor.
But when it's their turn, Alicia's defense team takes a new approach. And this time, they're armed with some serious legal firepower.
They brought in a top-notch attorney, Dennis Sweet. He's really a high-profile attorney in this area.
Sweet starts by criticizing investigators and the chaos that permeated their crime scene.
The defense pointed out that numerous folks, individuals, were allowed in the house that same night during the shooting, which may have contaminated things.
They didn't secure the scene. The crime scene investigator himself is pretty good. He doesn't lie. His crime scene was not secured. He came in, he's not supposed to secure it, he's supposed to investigate it. So it was like Grand Central Station going through it. He said, yeah.
With so much foot traffic at the crime scene and so many alleged affairs, Sweet asserts it's impossible to determine exactly who killed Brian.
The problems I saw were mainly the infidelity. It came out later on. I feel strongly it's not family, and I think there is some gunman out there who, for whatever reason, whether it's a jilted lover or whether it's some drug dealer that came and killed him. I feel like there's somebody still out there.
After running through the laundry list of jilted lovers and seething spouses who might want Brian dead, the defense turns to another piece of unexplained evidence: the skid marks found outside the home the night of the murder.
They said that skid marks could be there and there was no way to date them.
But Dennis Sweet claims he's found someone who can.
Dennis went and knocked on doors, and he found a neighbor that said, the police never interviewed me. They never come to my house.
On the stand, the Hughes neighbor Dorothea Presley tells the court that on the night of the murder, she awoke to the sound of gunfire.
After you heard the shots, what did you hear anything else?
Shortly thereafter, I heard a car skid away.
She heard the squelching of an automobile tire, like someone, leaving real fast after she heard gunshots. This lady had impeccable credibility, and I think that single witness probably provided the boost to the defense case.
On November 16, 2007, the jury once again breaks for deliberation.
I believe everybody was sitting on the edge of their chair wondering, what are they about to tell us? The courtroom was quiet. It seemed like it took forever for the jury to walk in and sit down.
Again, it takes just 2 hours for the jury to return with a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
When that second jury came back not guilty, it just doesn't get any better than that.
I don't even remember hearing all the words that were said after the not guilty. I was so thankful to God and to that jury.
Friends and family of Brian Hughes are devastated by the verdict.
They wonder if there'll ever be justice for Brian Hughes. In their minds and the minds of many who knew him, they think a killer got off.
Whoever pulled that trigger, they gonna get theirs one day. I mean, judgment day coming.
A lot of folks think that Alicia Hughes is a person who got away with murder. And there are those out there who think that someone else killed Brian. What's interesting is that we may never get the answer.
This, he maintained, was solely because he was so distraught over his cheating ex-girlfriend Clara being with another man. It was an excuse, a transparently partial truth, intended to camouflage a deeper, "What's your girlfriend's full name, Arthur?" I pressed, shifting the focus abruptly, looking for any other points of leverage, any other threads to pull in this increasingly complex tapestry of deceit. Clara what? Give me a full name. Finch, emotionally distraught and putting on a histrionic scene of feigned agony, slumped forward, running his hands through his hair, acting as if he couldn't believe that he was being blamed for this heinous crime, for Aggie's murder. At that point, we still didn't have sufficient physical evidence directly linking him to the murder for an immediate arrest. But Mr. Finch, with every word, every lie, every desperate deflection, was digging his own grave deeper and deeper, sealing his fate with his own mouth. Amidst his dramatic, calculated performance was that he was finally, reluctantly, able to obtain the full name of this girlfriend, Clara Jensen. That was a truly significant lead, the next step in dismantling his carefully crafted narrative of victim. We immediately went out and interviewed Clara Jensen. She was a woman in her late 30s, looking utterly exhausted and profoundly weary, but her eyes held a determined spark, a quiet resolve to speak her truth. She told us a completely different story about their breakup, heartbroken victim he had desperately portrayed himself to be. "I don't even know where to begin with that man, detective," she began, shaking her head slowly, her voice filled with a resigned sadness. "He's out of control, an absolute menace when he drinks and uses drugs. Unpredictable, violent." Her story was damning. Finch had indeed been drinking heavily and using drugs again recently, a relapse she'd discovered. They had had a furious, violent argument about his escalating addiction and his possessive, increasingly abusive behavior. She had, as a direct result, effectively thrown him out of her place, desperate to escape his spiraling rage and the toxicity he brought into her life. I now had clear, undeniable proof that Finch was lying completely and brazenly about the true context of his breakup with Clara. His narrative of heartbroken victimhood was a deliberate, cunning fabrication intended to draw sympathy and deflect from his own monstrous actions. But then, at the very end of her detailed, emotionally draining statement, Clara delivered a final, crucial bombshell, a piece of information that made my heart leap in my chest, a sudden jolt of recognition. "Plus, detective," she said, her voice dropping, as if sharing a final, reluctant secret. "There's another thing. When I finally threw Arthur out of my place that night, he didn't just leave. He took my car. A memorable vehicle in our small town. Really. Back when the car itself was only a faint ghost in a traumatized woman's memory. The witness who had seen a bluish-green boxy car, strikingly similar in description, parked on the bridge directly over Raven's Leap Falls, at an unusual hour. The very bridge from which Aggie's body was presumably dumped into the Cold Creek waters. This was it, the car, the missing link. That was important. I knew instantly, my mind racing, connecting the disparate threads with electrifying speed. That was a very strong, undeniable piece of the investigation at that point. Another thick, rusty nail hammered directly into Mr. Finch's coffin. This wasn't just circumstantial now, it was a physical connection to the crime's disposal. Now, I faced the urgent, final task of finding that car to retrieve the silent witness it held within its metal shell. And remarkably, almost as if drawn by the gravitational pull of justice, the car found us. A guy named Julian Krause called the police station, his voice riddled with anxiety and a desperate need to unburden himself, claiming to be Arthur Finch's cousin. "How are you doing, Mr. Krause?" I asked, my voice calm, professional, yet anticipating a major breakthrough. "I hear you have something that might interest me." He recounted how Finch had called him, frantic, early that morning, asking him to take the car up to a remote, rarely used logging road north of town, and to park it in a very specific, isolated spot, completely obscured from view. But Julian, deeply uneasy about Finch's recent erratic behavior, and profoundly unsettled by the omnipresent news of Aggie Abernathy's brutal murder, had just had a profoundly bad feeling about it. His conscience, combined with a primal, overriding fear of being implicated, had driven him to a crucial decision. He decided, instead of aiding his cousin in concealing evidence, to bring the car directly to the police station. It's another big gotcha moment in the case, I reflected later, the pieces of evidence finally overwhelming any lingering doubt. We strongly suspected that this specific car, Clara Jensen's Volt, had been used in the transportation of Aggie's deceased body to Ravensleep Falls. We immediately, unequivocally, legally seized the vehicle. We hoped, desperately, to find some biological trace evidence in that car, definitive, irrefutable proof that would link Aggie to the car, and, in turn, directly to Arthur Finch. I immediately called in the State Police CSI tech team, instructing them to deploy every resource available, every cutting-edge technique known to them in 1998. They meticulously went over the car, inch by painstaking inch, applying luminol, microscopic analysis, and fiber analysis. After hours of careful, arduous work, they found what they believed to be a faint body fluid stain on the passenger seat, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. A dark smear barely visible against the faded upholstery. It was the crucial link. They carefully removed that section of the seat cover, preserving every potential trace, and sealed it for transport to the state laboratory for analysis. Waiting for the results from the forensic lab was a long, painstaking, soul-crushing process. Each day stretched into an eternity of frustration and agonizing anticipation. They had to do things very meticulously, following strict chain of custody protocols, ensuring scientific rigor, and that simply took time. Precious, agonizing time. Weeks crawled by, each passing day a test of my waning patience. Each call to the lab met with the same frustrating answer. Still processing. Sergeant Sterling, these things take time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, after countless follow-ups and polite, yet increasingly insistent, inquiries, the results came in. Sergeant Sterling, the lab technician's voice was, as ever, calm, professional, yet carrying a faint note of caution, of reserved optimism. The news was a mixed bag, offering both a crucial link and a frustrating limitation, typical of the era's forensic capabilities. The bodily fluid samples from the car definitively matched Agnes Abernathy. It unequivocally tied her, and therefore her murderer, to the specific car, confirming its use as the method of transportation for her Amias, to Ravensleep Falls. Another vital, irrefutable link in the chain of evidence. No discernible genetic material from Arthur Finch was found within the microscopic, degraded material that could be reliably sampled and profiled using the techniques then available. The State Police Laboratory, while commendably thorough, claimed they were simply unable to get any conclusive DNA readings or what they called amplification from the minuscule, degraded material they had extracted. We had hoped, desperately, for biological evidence directly connecting Finch and Aggie, in an undeniable, provable sense, a direct, personal link, and, devastatingly, we didn't get that. We could irrefutably say that Finch had undisputed access to the car, and that Aggie's bodily fluids were undeniably in it. But, critically, we did not have any scientific evidence proving that Finch himself was the one driving the car, or that he was in it with her during the murder itself. I was left with a powerful, burning conviction. Deep in my gut, I was profoundly, absolutely convinced that Arthur Finch was Aggie Abernathy's rapist and murderer. But without that direct DNA link, without that scientific smoking gun, I was unable given the legal standards of the time, to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt in a courtroom. We would only get one shot at this. If a jury, in the absence of definitive DNA, threw it out, if they returned a not guilty verdict, we could never come back at him. All the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, the accumulating lies, the unparalleled access to the crime scene, the horrific prior conviction for sexual assault and abduction, visible physical scratches on his face, his profoundly suspicious demeanor, the car linked directly to the victim, all pointed inexorably to him. But without that final, clinching, scientific piece of direct evidence, there just wasn't quite enough, not in 1998, to secure an arrest and a subsequent conviction that would withstand a vigorous, competent defense. So, I did what all homicide detectives sometimes have to do, a task both agonizing and profoundly necessary. I waited. Chapter 5. Justice delayed. The waiting was excruciating. It was a tangible, horrible thing, a persistent, gnawing ache at the edges of my professional resolve, a shadow clinging to my every waking thought, permeating my dreams. But patience, a grim necessity in the desolate world of cold cases, was a virtue I had cultivated over years, something I now possessed, something I needed to exercise, often against my very nature. I knew, with a gut certainty that bordered on obsession, that I couldn't prosecute Arthur Finch then and there, not in 1998. The forensic science, for all its marvels, simply wasn't ready for him, not for the definitive, unassailable proof we required. I had to wait for some other method, some future scientific advancement, some unforeseen evolution of forensic technique, to unequivocally tie Mr. Finch to this horrific crime. The bedrock of our legal system, the standard of reasonable doubt, demanded irrefutable proof. The frustration of living with an unsolved case, a brutal murder whose perpetrator I knew with unwavering certainty yet couldn't fully bring to justice, was a heavy burden to deal with day in and day out. It was a weight I carried home, a cloud that followed me. It was even more difficult in a small town like Blackwood Creek, where everyone knew me, knew my family. They saw me, Detective Sergeant Miles Corbin, the lead investigator, as the stumbling block between justice and the brutal, senseless death of a beloved community member. You see these people at church, in the grocery store, at every town meeting, at every turn in the quiet roads, and you see the look they give you, the look of disappointment, the look of blame, the look of guilt, the unspoken accusation that you, their local lawman, had somehow, in some fundamental way, failed them. It was particularly difficult, profoundly painful, to face Aggie's daughters, Abigail and Iris. Their grief remained raw, decades later, their questions constant, their eyes pleading for answers I couldn't yet give them. There were so many crucial investigative details, I couldn't tell them. Elements of Finch's lies and Clara Jensen's damning story that had to remain strictly confidential, guarded meticulously for the ultimate integrity of a future prosecution. Why would somebody have done that? How could you? How could you do something like that to our mother? Their voices, thick with pain, still echoed in my memory, a haunting refrain. They, like the rest of the town, felt our department was just a small-town police outfit, unsophisticated, under-equipped, that we had somehow screwed up. We heard the scuttlebutt, the whispered accusations in the local diner, the subtle glances in the post office. But I, Sergeant Sterling, did not quit. We just kept meticulously piling up all the evidence that we could, preserving it in a carefully catalogued file, waiting for its day to shine, waiting for justice to finally be able to breathe. But the more time that passed, the stronger the grim reality became. I was still absent some vital linking pieces, some technological breakthrough, to bring this whole thing together and secure an ironclad conviction. The initial scientific limitations of 1998 were a stark, frustrating barrier, a brick wall in the path of justice. I explored every avenue, every possibility, leaving no stone unturned in my relentless pursuit. At one point, years into the cold case, we revisited the trace evidence from Clara Jensen's vintage Volvo S70 car the Vera car Finch had driven. Specifically, some minute, unusual wood shavings that had been meticulously collected. I believed these unique fragments might be a potential answer to my prayers, a novel, indirect piece of trace evidence. I approached our state lab director, Dr. Elena Vargas, with the idea, a final, desperate gambit. Sergeant Sterling came to me. Dr. Vargas would recall years later. her tone a mix of amusement and profound respect for my tenacity, and was discussing these tiny wood fragments that were found in the car. He wanted somebody, an expert of the highest caliber, to compare it to the specific wood at what we believed to be the primary crime scene in the apartment above the spinning cycle laundromat. I found out the FBI has a wood expert, Dr. Vargas stated, her tone initially dry. A wood expert, I retorted, genuinely incredulous, a weary sigh escaping me. What do you mean? There's a professor of wood. Is that even a real thing? Ken would truly speak in a courtroom. But if there was an expert, anywhere in the country, who could help, who could lend a shred of credibility, I would use them. I had to. Desperation breeds innovation. We secured funding and authorization, a long, bureaucratic process, and brought in these experts in forensic wood evidence, specialized consultants from outside the state lab system, seasoned botanists and wood technologists with rare expertise. They meticulously analyzed the samples under powerful electron microscopes. Their determination, after painstaking microscopic and chemical analysis, was detailed and compelling for its time. The unique wood chips and fragments found in the car indeed originated from the specific construction materials at the third-floor apartment building above the laundromat. This, for 1998, was groundbreaking forensic science, pushing the boundaries. It meticulously proved that the fragments were physically transferred from the primary crime scene, the murder location, into Clara's car, and subsequently could have been transferred from the car to the secondary dump site at Ravensleep Falls, carried by the perpetrator. But it was, in a sense, what would later be viewed as junk science, relative to what the future would hold. In 1998, everyone, even then, was beginning to talk about the nascent field of DNA. Everyone wanted that sure hit, the ceiling high probability numbers that indisputable genetic evidence could provide, the ultimate scientific verdict. So the prosecutor, after reviewing the detailed, technical, but complex and largely circumstantial wood report, looked at me, a slight frown of polite skepticism on his face, and said, "Okay, Miles, you've got wood chips. That's good. Thank you for your thoroughness. Truly." It was a polite dismissal, an acknowledgement of my dedication. It was not quite the smoking gun he needed for a slam-dunk murder conviction against a high-risk defendant like Arthur Finch. But if you look at where my mind was going on this, the depths of my persistence, you can just see that I wasn't giving up. I was constantly calling the crime lab, sending additional evidence, emails, letters, pushing the envelope, insisting on retesting in new analytical angles. Hey, how about this? How about this? Let's try this. What new methods are emerging? What future science holds promise? I just kept working, tirelessly, relentlessly, never losing faith that science would eventually catch up to my gut feeling, to the truth I so strongly felt. We had to wait. We had to wait for DNA science to move forward, to evolve into a far more powerful and pervasive investigative tool, to become the ultimate arbiter of truth. We had to wait for some other, irrefutable method, a truly unequivocal link, to tie Mr. Finch to this heinous crime. And so, despite my profound personal conviction and the ever-mounting circumstantial evidence, the matter, eventually, agonizingly, went cold. It stayed cold for a long, unimaginable time, for 16 years. It stayed cold until the year 2013. 16 long, silent, frustrating years had passed since the brutal murder of Agnes Abernathy. 16 years of her daughters living with unspoken questions, with an agonizing void. 16 years of the community's lingering unease, its shattered sense of safety. And 16 years of my own quiet, persistent frustration, a low burn of unfinished business. By 2013, I was nearing the twilight of my illustrious career, no longer in active homicide, but serving as a cold case consultant. Yet, Aggie's thick, meticulously compiled file remained, a heavy burden in my consciousness, a case that had never truly left me. But this particular cold case, like so many others across the nation, finally came down to the unwavering, unstoppable march of science. Technology had advanced in a rapid, almost unimaginable way since 1998, far beyond the rudimentary DNA analysis of that era. The very cold case unit that I had helped establish in my later years at the department, now staffed by a new generation of dedicated, technologically savvy investigators, finally reopened Aggie Abernathy's file, breathing new life, new hope, into the old, stale evidence. The original physical evidence statement section of seat cover from Clara Jensen's Volvo. The specific piece, with the suspected bodily fluid stain meticulously preserved by my foresight and sealed away for years, was finally brought out of archival storage for fresh, cutting-edge re-examination. The lab, now equipped with state-of-the-art forensic capabilities far beyond what existed in 1998, was finally able to do what was once considered impossible: identify viable DNA in the minute biological material that had been found in Clara Peterson's car. They were able to extract and amplify minuscule traces of semen from the nearly invisible body fluid stains on the seat cover, degraded samples that the earlier, less sensitive methods simply couldn't detect or profile. And then, in a dramatic, long-awaited breakthrough that sent shockwaves through the cold case unit, using that newly developed genetic profile, they compared it to the cigarette butts that Detective Sergeant Miles Corbin, had been so prescient, so instinctual, to collect and carefully keep when I first talked to Arthur Finch back in 19, preserving them against all odds in the evidence locker. And there it was, the moment of truth, a direct, unequivocal, undeniable match. There were strong, astronomically high probability matches from the DNA on the cigarette butts, unequivocally linking Arthur Finch to the genetic material found in Clara's car, which in turn was definitively linked to Aggie Abernathy. The numbers were astronomical, defying any possibility of coincidence. We had them at this point: Sergeant Sterling, the lead cold case detective, her voice brimming with a triumph I had dreamed of for years. The numbers are so astronomically high, miles through the ceiling, that we had them. There's absolutely no question. It's him. It was Arthur Finch all along. The arrest warrant, now armed with irrefutable DNA evidence, was immediately signed. Arthur Finch, who had slipped through our fingers for so long, had a new, grim address: a jail cell. We had known, through my continuous diligence and the low-level monitoring I had maintained over the years, that Finch had eventually relocated and was residing in a quiet town in coastal South Carolina. A joint team of investigators from the state's attorney's cold case unit, along with federal assistance, traveled south and arrested him without incident. A seamless operation after 16 years of waiting. He was transported back north, up to Connecticut, brought back to the very state where he had committed his heinous crime. They attempted an interview. Finch, of course, predictably, remained uncooperative. He wouldn't say a word, his face a stone mask of defiance. Even when confronted with the cold, hard, irrefutable evidence, the digital printouts of his own DNA, he remained a silent, stubborn, cold figure. The evidence, meticulous and irrefutable, spoke for him, painting a picture no lawyer could distort. The likelihood was now beyond great, virtually, that the crime occurred in the following horrific manner: a grim narrative pieced together from forensic science, witness testimony, fueled by alcohol and other substances, in a state of profound emotional distress. He was drunk, high, after being turned down for companionship by Maria, and freshly infuriated by his cheating girlfriend, Clara. He was consumed by a toxic mixture of anger, resentment, and profound. He hated the world, and most likely, he particularly hated women at that moment, seeking an outlet for his simmering rage and bruised ego. And then, in a terrifying, arbitrary twist of fate, he saw Agnes Abernathy. Somebody he knew, someone familiar, kind, One must keep in mind that sexual assault is not, fundamentally, a crime of sexual gratification. It's a crime of power, of control, often deeply rooted in the perpetrator's profound misogyny, a heinous act of the punishment and degradation of women. Arthur Finch, at that moment, consumed by a blinding, toxic rage, was brimming with a profound hatred for women, and he desperately needed to hurt someone, to reassert a twisted sense of control over a world that he felt had rejected and humiliated him. And he selected Aggie Abernathy, a woman of boundless warmth and kindness, precisely because of her gentle nature, her inherent vulnerability, making her an easy target for his monstrous impulses. "Hey, Aggie." "Oh, hey, Arthur. How are you doing tonight?" Aggie, ever friendly, ever gracious, her voice open, trusting, utterly unaware of the danger lurking within him. "Hey, Aggie, I was just heading up to check on the empty apartment upstairs, the one I was telling you about earlier. That might be opening up for possibly relocating. Did you want to come up and check it out real quick?" no obligation. Oh, Arthur, I probably shouldn't. I've got Fifi, my dog, in the car, and my laundry's almost done. Oh, it'll only take a minute, Aggie, truly, just a quick peek. It's perfect. Come on, it'll be fast. Then you can go straight home. Won't take long at all. Just a quick look upstairs, show you what I meant. He lured her up into that empty, isolated third-floor apartment unit, the very space that would become the primary crime scene. Aggie, innocent, trusting in the familiarity of her building's maintenance man, with no reason to fear him, went with him. She didn't feel threatened by him. She had no idea she was placing herself in that type of grave, mortal danger. Once they got up into the apartment, the door closed, and the monster inside Arthur Finch emerged. He attacked her brutally, savagely. He raped her. He manually strangled her, savagely, taking her life with his bare hands, watching the last flicker of life leave her eyes. Then, with chilling premeditation and a desire to erase his tracks, he bound her lifeless body with duct tape. He meticulously cleaned what he could, then carried her body down the stairs, a grim burden, and placed her in the backseat of Clara Jensen's Volvo, the car he had stolen from his estranged girlfriend. Her own car, the beat-up old Volvo, with Fifi still barking inside, was left idling outside the laundromat. He then drove her to the secluded Ravensleep Falls. In the early hours of the morning, the blue-green sedan, a ghostly, boxy shape in the dim pre-dawn light. There, with cold contempt, he dragged her body from the car, and then threw her into the stream, discarding her like garbage, a final, dehumanizing act of desecration. He then went on about his miserable life, convinced he had outwitted justice, confident his crime was perfect. For 16 long, unpunished years, he got away with it, blending back into society, living a quiet, unnoticed life. Until the relentless march of science and the unwavering dedication of detectives finally, irrevocably, caught up to him. Arthur Finch was formally charged with murder and presented before a judge at Superior Court in Middletown, Connecticut. I was there, sitting quietly in the courtroom, watching him as he was wheeled in, a ghost of the man I had first interviewed. I was shocked, truly shocked, at his physical appearance. The wiry, nervous, agitated man I remembered from 1998 was gone, replaced by a husk of a man. He was morbidly obese, his body frail and failing, slumped in a wheelchair, connected to a nasal cannula, providing oxygen, breathing heavily. Very immobile, a shadow of the predatory menace he once was, now just a pathetic, decaying figure. That's what happens, I thought, with grim, cold satisfaction. You know, karma comes back. Sometimes it just takes a while. It does. The case proceeded through its arduous prosecution phase, the weight of the new, definitive DNA evidence, irrefutable, undeniable. Finally, in 2016, facing an insurmountable mountain of forensic proof, overwhelming witness testimony, and the prospect of a lengthy, agonizing trial, Finch decided to plead guilty to Aggie's murder. He was sentenced to the rest of his natural life in prison, to be served in a maximum security facility. Given his precarious physical condition, his rapidly deteriorating health, he wasn't going to last that long in prison. But that's precisely where he went. He would not get out alive, no doubt. His freedom, finally and forever, was gone, an irreversible consequence of his monstrous actions. Grace and Iris Abernathy, Aggie's daughters, were present in the courtroom for the sentencing. Their faces, though still etched with the pain of decades, now bore a fragile, hard-won sense of closure, of peace finally descending. "I'm glad he's finally paying the price for what he did," Grace said outside the courtroom, her voice clear, firm, a profound strength emanating from her. Iris, still remembering her mother's unique warmth, her kindness, added softly, her voice thick with emotion. "He took one of the most beautiful people out of this world, someone who is so deeply loved, who is so incredibly kind to people, so caring. She's truly, truly missed. Aggie is truly, truly missed, every single day, for all these years." We had heard the whispers, back in the day, that we were just a small-town police department, unsophisticated, that we couldn't possibly investigate anything as complex or as horrific as this. But we knew, with quiet, unwavering conviction, that we could do the case. I personally have no regrets as to how long this took. I carry a lot of frustration from the years of waiting, the quiet battles fought, the relentless pushing, but I also carry a profound sense of satisfaction, a deep-seated pride in a job finally completed. If I had not resolved this case to this day, I still would be working on it, because justice demanded it, and I had given my word, taken my oath, and now, justice has been provided. Mr. Arthur Finch is now confined to a 6-by-9-foot concrete room for the rest of his days. However many days those are, he met his justice, and Agnes Abernathy, at long last, found hers. The cold current of her murder finally found its definitive, unyielding justice. Part 2. The Ghost in the Machine. Chapter 6. Crimson Bay Morning. It's June 25th, 2016. The early morning fog, a common curtain along the Oregon coast, clung to the sleepy suburbs of Viridian Heights, a sprawling town northeast of the vibrant hub of Portland. The mist was usually a comforting blanket, muffling the sounds of the waking world, lending a quiet beauty to the cedar-lined streets. Today, however, that familiar fog did little to soothe the frayed nerves of Evelyn Albright. An inexplicable undercurrent of unease had been simmering within her all day, a quiet, unsettling premonition that something was amiss. Evelyn, a woman in her late 30s, her face etched with the subtle lines of a life lived on the edge of stress, had been out since mid-morning with her two youngest, Clara and Leo. The usual Saturday chaos of suburban errands had consumed her, navigating the labyrinthine aisles of big-box stores, the cheerful insistence of her children for brightly colored toys, the mundane rhythm of consumerism, punctuated by their bickering and laughter. This was her Saturday reality. Her husband, Arthur Caldwell, was at home, ostensibly working on a project in the garage, escaping the household cacophony. They were just finishing the arduous task of unloading the last of the shopping bags from the minivan into the kitchen, the flimsy plastic rustling like dry leaves, when the ordinary shattered with brutal, deafening abruptness. Eleanor, balancing a precariously loaded carton of milk and a bag of discount cereal, heard at first a sound that, even now, years later, reverberated in her nightmares with chilling clarity. Clara, her spirited 7-year-old daughter, a bright, energetic child, let out a piercing scream from deeper within the house, from the area of the garage entrance, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. "Mom, what is going on?" Clara's voice, usually a cheerful trill, was now a ragged shriek, high-pitched with primal fear, a sound that froze Evelyn in her tracks, her muscles logging in involuntary horror. Liam, her 4-year-old son, then stumbled into the kitchen, his small face, pale and twisted with an expression Evelyn had never seen before. A blank, vacant, horrified stare, utterly devoid of the usual sparkle. His tiny finger pointed, trembling uncontrollably, towards the hallway leading from the garage, towards the heart of their home. "Mom, there's blood everywhere." His voice was a thin, reedy whisper, devoid of its usual playful cheer, stripped of all childish innocence, weighted with an adult terror. Evelyn's blood ran cold. The groceries clattered to the floor, milk cartons splitting open, milk pooling in a spreading white stain against the linoleum. Her mind reeled, grasping frantically for a rational explanation. An accident, a clumsy fall in the garage. But Leo's words, blood everywhere. The image clawed at her, raw and terrifying, painted in her imagination even before she dared to look. She didn't dare go further inside. Her instinct, primal and absolute, was to protect her children, to shield them from whatever monstrous, unimaginable scene awaited them beyond that kitchen door. She scrambled back out of the house, fumbling for her phone with trembling fingers, the cold plastic suddenly feeling alien, slippery, in her grasp. The chill of the coastal fog seemed to intensify, wrapping around her in a suffocating, almost predatory embrace, pressing in on her panic. Dialing 911, her voice rose in a frantic, hysterical shriek, barely coherent. Arthur, is he alive?" The name of her husband, Arthur Caldwell, tore from her throat, a desperate, guttural cry. She couldn't process the sudden, terrifying vacuum his absence implied, the terrifying possibility that he was gone. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Who is Arthur? Can you tell me what happened? What do you see?" The dispatcher patiently prompted, trying desperately to pull coherence from chaos, to ground her in reality. "My husband, he's hurt. There's so much blood. Oh God, I can't go back in there. No, I don't want to go in there. Her breath hitched, ragged and uncontrolled, searing her throat, hot tears streaming down her face, unchecked. The dispatcher was trying to talk her through it, guiding her, but the words were a muffled jumble in her terror-stricken mind, a cacophony of primal fear and desperate plea. The officers are driving there as fast as they can. Okay, man, can you tell me what you see from where you are? From the street? Anything at all? I'm scared. What do I do? What do I do? Evelyn sank onto the porch steps, her knees weak, pulling her children close, shielding them with her own trembling body, her own heart-rending sobs mixing with Clara's silent tears. She was too consumed by her own unraveling horror to truly comprehend the full scope of what had befallen Arthur Caldwell. And when she finally did, when the truth was laid bare, when the true extent of the evil was revealed, she would be irrevocably, utterly shattered. My name is Detective Sergeant Victor Vic Sterling. In 2016, I was a senior investigator with the Viridian Heights Police Department's Homicide Bureau, a role I'd held for decades, carrying the weight of countless crime scenes, countless shattered lives. The phrase "I was across town" that starts this story comes from Officer Kevin Miller, one of my junior officers, a bright, capable young man still learning the ropes. He was closer to the scene, already on patrol in the Eastern District. The call had initially come through as a vague medical call, they said. Not many specific details, just an address on Cedarwood Drive and a note about an unresponsive male, major blood loss. As Miller raced through the familiar tree-lined streets of Viridian Heights, he felt that familiar tightening in his gut, the instinctual dread of a veteran officer. When Officer Miller arrived at the address on Cedarwood Drive, the scene was already in disarray, a chaotic tableau unfolding on an otherwise peaceful suburban street. The perfect, anonymous picture of quiet suburban domesticity. But the family of Alan Albright and her two terrified children, Clara and Leo, with three other younger Caldwell children still huddling fearfully inside. Unseen were huddled visibly on the sidewalk outside, clutching each other, their faces uniformly pale, tear-streaked, and twisted with shock. No one, absolutely no one, not even the patrol officers present, wanted to go back into the house, a profound unspoken dread radiating from the open front door. "Ma'am, what's going on? Can you tell me what happened inside?" But she was largely incoherent, her body trembling with uncontrolled fear, her answers choked by ragged sobs. Miller, a seasoned patrol officer, pulled on his standard-issue gloves, adjusting his sidearm, the familiar way to cold comfort in the rising tide of dread. His mind, trained for protocol, for worst-case scenarios, for managing sudden crises, went on high alert. With a curt nod to his backup officer, who was establishing a wider perimeter, Miller walked purposefully towards the open front door. Metallic and vaguely sweet, the unmistakable aroma of fresh blood grew stronger with each tentative step, prickling his nostrils. "Mr. Caldwell, Arthur Caldwell, is anyone home?" he called out, his voice deep, resonant, designed to elicit a response, however faint. Silence. A profound, unsettling quiet within the home, a void where life should be. The interior of the house was a sharp contrast to its demure exterior, to the tranquil suburban street outside. It wasn't a scene of overt chaos or violent destruction, no overturned furniture, no obvious signs of a struggle near the entryway, but rather a profound, pervasive state of general disarray, an everyday chaos amplified by the horror. Dishes piled high in the sink, stale food odors lingering, blankets half pulled from the backs of sofas. It felt less like a meticulously staged crime scene and more like a deeply lit, casually neglected home, a portrait of ordinary, messy life. There's just stuff everywhere, scattered throughout, kids' toys, clothes. Miller would later observe to me, mentally noting that this might simply be the family's established living condition, not necessarily the immediate result of a violent struggle or a frantic ransom. He rounded the corner from the entryway, his hand already instinctively gripping his weapon, drawing it slightly from its holster, and moved towards the kitchen, and that's when he saw him. The source of the terrifying silence, the overwhelming smell. Jesus! Miller's breath hitched in his throat. Arthur Caldwell lay on the stained linoleum floor, half slumped against the lower kitchen cabinets, his head tilted at an unnatural, horrifying angle. His form was almost indistinguishable from the expansive, horrifying crimson pool that surrounded his head. Against the pale kitchen floor, reflecting the harsh light, inexplicable violence that no training could ever truly prepare you for. A faint, gurgling, wet sound, a desperate struggle for breath. He's breathing, just barely, a fragile, flickering spark of life in the midst of overwhelming death. "We got you, buddy. Hang in there," Miller murmured the automatic words, a low, urgent voice, a lifeline offered, even as his mind rapidly processed the horror before him, the magnitude of the blood loss, the profound head trauma. The initial 911 call, reporting an accident and a bleeding victim, had been standard procedure. The standard response, without specific details, was to send EMTs, assuming an accidental fall, a kitchen accident. Officer Miller's immediate, instinctive thought, seeing the grotesque extent of the blood and the awkward position, was similar. He must have hit his head on the counter or something, really hard, he muttered to himself, his face pale with shock, his stomach churning. He was looking frantically around the chaotic kitchen, his eyes scanning for anything, a spilled liquid, a wet patch, a loose rug, anything seeking a logical explanation for the magnitude of the wound, for this profound violence. Did Arthur have some type of sudden, severe medical emergency, perhaps a stroke or heart attack, collapsing and striking his head on the unforgiving edge of a countertop or the hard linoleum floor? The blood pattern, however, was immense, far too much for a mere bump, however severe. Miller was trying desperately to make sense of the grim tableau, struggling to fit it into the comforting. A moment later, the EMTs, already staging outside, rushed in, their voices terse, efficient, their movements practiced, disciplined. They quickly began their assessment, their faces grim, preparing Arthur for immediate transport. "We're going to transport him now, Arthur," one of them said, urgency in his voice. "He's got major head trauma, significant blood loss, critical condition. Ensuring gentle handling for such a delicate, fragile transfer." He pulled his hand back, frowning, and peered closer at the fabric, his mind trying to reconcile the sensation. There was a faint, clean tear in the material. "There's no way," Miller murmured, disbelief warring with a sudden, terrible, horrifying certainty that slammed into him like a physical blow. The fragment wasn't from a household appliance or a piece of debris from the unkempt kitchen. It was bullet lead. "That's a bullet fragment," he announced. His voice, usually calm and composed in crisis, held an undeniable, sharp edge of shock and alarm. Everyone stopped. The organized chaos of emergency response froze, suspended in a horrified terror. The EMTs looked at Miller, confusion, then dawning, horrified comprehension in their eyes, their faces draining of color. Took an involuntary step back, his jaw slack, his weapon still clutched in his hand. This was no accident. This was murder, or, at the very least, attempted murder of the most brutal, personal kind. As Arthur Caldwell was swiftly loaded into the ambulance, the stretcher gliding smoothly away, destined for the sterile, buzzing world of the emergency room. His fragile life hanging by the most tenuous of threads, Officer Miller barked into his radio. "Dispatch. This is Patrol Unit 7 to 19. Urgent. Roll major crimes. Full team. 21754 Cedarwood Drive. Requesting forensics. See." The quiet Saturday morning in Viridian Heights, under its shroud of coastal fog. And for me, Victor Sterling, the weary voice of experience, the call was about to come. The long road of yet another investigation had just begun. Chapter 7. The .22 caliber conundrum. The notification reached me just as I was enjoying a rare, uninterrupted cup of strong, black coffee at the precinct, nestled deep in the familiar scent of stale paper, toner, and regret. I was reviewing old cold case files, my mind drifting through forgotten details of old investigations, when the insistent, demanding ring of my desk phone cut through the quiet. The call from dispatch was curt, formal, betraying no emotion beyond rote procedure. A flicker of profound relief evident on his young face, even through the exhaustion and shock. "Detective Elena Vargas is already inside with CSU. She took the initial walkthrough, following protocol. Sergeant." Elena Vargas, a sharp, ambitious detective, recently transferred from property crimes. I'd seen her raw potential, her meticulous precision, her keen eye for overlooked detail, her hunger for answers. This would be her first time as a lead investigator on a full-blown homicide case, and I intended to guide her through the labyrinth. "Vargas, what have we got so far?" I asked, stepping over the bright yellow crime scene tape, the metallic tumps of blood now subtly permeating the humid Oregon air, mingling with the earthy scent of damp fog. Her notebook was clutched tightly in her gloved hand, its pages filled with neat, precise observations. Listed in critical condition, but the prognosis is extremely poor. Officer Miller here. She gestured towards the young officer, made the initial. He averted a major error. Historically speaking, Elena, I said, my voice grave, resonating with the weight of experience, a GSW to the back of the head. Close range like this that almost always turns into a homicide, even if he survives, the quality of life would be profoundly impacted. A living death. So we're working this as if it already is a full murder, full protocol, no shortcuts, every detail matters. Elena nodded, her jaw set, absorbing my words. Her pen was already scratching furiously in her notebook, capturing every detail, every instruction. She then led me inside, carefully retracing the path Officer Miller had taken, detailing her preliminary observations. The interior of the house, as Mila had noted, was a chaotic mess of daily living. Clothes strewn carelessly across furniture, blankets half pulled from the backs of sofas. It felt less like an intentionally ransacked crime scene, designed to mislead, and more like a deeply lived-in, casually neglected home portrait of ordinary, messy family life that had abruptly ceased. No signs of a struggle, Elena summarized, her finger pointing at various accumulations of domestic debris. We made our way into the kitchen, the air now thick with cloying. The linoleum floor was a stained, grim canvas of clotted crimson, a sickening, dark expanse. Amidst this, discernible traces of grayish-pink matter-brain tissue, a silent testament to the extreme violence perpetrated. It was a chilling tableau of casual brutality, the mundane setting heightening the horror. Elena explained, gesturing with her gloved hand towards the doorway. The spatter and blood pattern suggests he was actively walking this way. From the garage, the projectile seems to have penetrated and then likely passed through or fragmented, splattering some brain tissue and blood right here, by the doorframe, upon initial impact. My eyes narrowed as I mentally recreated the horrifying sequence, playing it out repeatedly in the theater of my mind, trying to place myself in the killer's shoes. I'm imagining where the shooter would have been standing, I mused aloud, pacing a short distance from the doorway, careful not to disturb anything. The trajectory suggests they were directly behind him, or very close. This gives us an initial indication of bullet path, and where the projectile might have traveled beyond the victim. The possibility of an exit wound, or a bullet impacting other surfaces, was critical. Drifted towards the adjacent living room, visible through an open archway. Her eyes widened slightly, her head tilting, radiating outwards from a central impact point, almost like a grotesque, mechanical eye. A bullet hole, I confirmed, moving closer, my eyes scanning the impact pattern. Looks like a clean hit. The entire force of the projectile, or a substantial, intact fragment, struck the screen directly after passing through the victim or in the immediate aftermath of the initial shot. The entry aperture is incredibly small, much smaller than standard pistol calibers for a serious shooting. This is highly unusual. The discovery sent a peculiar chill through us both. .22 caliber, I repeated, the caliber of the firearm hanging heavy in the humid air. It was a peculiar choice for such a violent, intimate act. Unique. .22s are usually small game rifles, plinking guns, target practice weapons, or easily concealable handguns. Killer seeking stopping power. It's odd. And usually, Alina, when something is odd, it's profoundly significant. This weapon selection tells a story. The crime scene, stripped of the immediate emergency and now a meticulous mosaic of evidence markers, spoke volumes. We began as all homicide investigations must, grappling with the unknown, exploring all avenues. What had truly transpired here, we started to brainstorm, considering all possibilities, however remote. Could be a home invasion, a botched burglary, an unfortunate victim caught in the crossfire of some external, criminal element, a debt collection gone violent. I offered, running through the possibilities common to our district. It's not entirely uncommon in Viridian Heights, particularly property crime and drug-related violence, spilling over from some of the grittier areas bordering us. Historically, though it usually evens out, was indeed bordered by areas with documented issues of drug activity, petty crime, and occasional low-level gang presence. But as Elena and I meticulously scoured the house, every corner, every cupboard, every doorframe, every window latch, the theory of a random home invasion began to unravel, systematically disproven by the stark physical absence of corroborating evidence. Critically, there were no obvious signs of ransacking, no rifled drawers, no overturned furniture, no emptied jewelry boxes, no valuable electronics obviously missing. Everything, despite the pervasive clutter, appeared undisturbed, save for the brutal violence in the kitchen itself. Reaching the same conclusion as I had already been forming, our investigative minds converging. Someone Arthur knew, perhaps even trusted enough to allow into his home without suspicion. Someone close enough to get behind him, to shoot him in the back of the head, and leave no trace of a prolonged struggle in the immediate vicinity, besides the initial impact of the bullet. A .22 caliber, it implies intimacy. It implies a moment of unexpected violence from a known person, someone Arthur wouldn't expect to threaten him from behind. Who was he, beyond the victim on the kitchen floor? What connections did he have? What relationships? What hidden secrets? What involvement could he have had that might lead to such brutal, intimate violence from someone he presumably knew? Who are you? Arthur Caldwell, I mused aloud, the question a heavy weight. And why would somebody want to remove you from this earth in such a callous, personal manner? The question, as always, hung heavy in the air, a silent promise of relentless pursuit to the victim's ghost. Chapter 8. Backpack in the bushes. Leaving the immediate crime scene for a brief respite, Elena and I began the crucial process of canvassing the perimeter of the property in the wider neighborhood. The omnipresent residential cameras, the ever-present digital eyes of modern suburbia, were a paramount priority in this initial stage of the investigation. We hoped that a neighbor's discreet lens, a hidden security system, might have caught a crucial glimpse of someone, anyone, coming or going during the crucial window of time surrounding the shooting. My established routine, honed over decades, was to meticulously fill out a carefully handwritten business card with my contact details. Elena, with her sharp eyes and extensive experience honed by years of property crime investigations, was particularly adept at spotting such discrete details, noticing even the smallest cameras often missed by others. "Hey, Sergeant Corbin, check this out," she called, her voice sharp with a new discovery. She pointed towards a dense, overgrown patch of tangled shrubs and tall grasses along the back fence line of the Caldwell property, where the natural foliage was thickest, wedged deeply beneath them, almost deliberately concealed by the dense growth. "Well, what's that doing there, hidden like that?" I murmured, my voice a low rumble, as I cautiously approached, careful not to disturb the ground. And she carefully, painstakingly, extracted the backpack from its damp, grassy hiding place. We unzipped it, cautiously examining its contents on a sterile sheet spread on the ground. A leather wallet, and a small, Ziploc baggie containing what appeared to be dried marijuana, along with a glass pipe used for smoking. Elena pulled out the wallet, her brow furrowing slightly in concentration. "The driver's license. Sergeant, it belongs to Arthur's oldest son, Felix Caldwell. His birth date confirms it's him, an adult residing at this very address." Felix Caldwell, Arthur's stepson, and eldest child. The peculiar presence of his backpack, deliberately concealed in the backyard, and deeply disturbing new line of inquiry, had brought a dangerous, criminal element drug dealers, rivals, angry customers end to the Caldwell family home. Could this be a drug deal gone sideways, a debt unpaid, a score to settle, spilling into a sudden, horrific act of violence that spiraled out of control? The pieces were starting to hint at a dark, secret life within the family. It was clear that the immediate crime scene, even with the newly discovered backpack, offered little more tangible evidence at that precise moment. The complex emotional landscape surrounding Arthur Caldwell's life would inevitably come from those who knew Arthur best, his immediate family. And they, heartbroken, terrified, and utterly shattered by the events, were currently gathered at the hospital, at Arthur's bedside, desperately clinging to a fragile hope. It was a somber, necessary pilgrimage for us, a difficult and delicate task that required both sensitivity and a relentless drive for information. Elena and I drove to St. Jude's Medical Center, the silence in the car broken only by the distant, mournful wail of other emergency vehicles on the city streets. Arthur was in the intensive care unit, a sterile, buzzing nexus of life and death, an impersonal landscape of sophisticated machinery, fragile presence beneath the harsh, unforgiving hospital lights. A breathing tube snaked from his mouth, silently, rhythmically working to keep his lungs alive, forcing breath into his compromised, broken body. His younger children, Clara, their young minds struggling desperately to comprehend a sudden, terrifying shift in their world. The terrifying reality of their father's silent struggle. Amira Caldwell, Arthur's oldest daughter from a previous marriage. I just sat there and held my dad's hand for a few minutes. Amira would later recall, her voice thick with barely suppressed pain, the memory raw. I just kept playing it over in my mind, the doctor's grim words, wondering whether he was actually going to come home to us. Every little girl, no matter her age, just wants her dad to come home, to be safe. The prognosis, however, delivered by a solemn-faced neurosurgeon who specialized in complex head trauma, was grim and unforgiving. Arthur Caldwell was, effectively, clinically, brain-dead. His body, kept alive by sophisticated machines and artificial respiration, had reached its inevitable, tragic end. The grim reality hit us with cold, clinical certainty. This was now, without a shadow of a doubt, a confirmed homicide investigation. We were no longer simply investigating an attempted murder. We were seeking justice for a life irrevocably, brutally taken. My immediate thought, a strategy hammered out over decades of complex detective work, was crystal clear. Start with the wife, Evelyn Albright. She was, in every sense, the person closest to the victim, both emotionally and often physically. She was also the primary adult who discovered the horrific scene. However, indirectly, after her frightened children, she would possess the most immediate, visceral insights. We found Evelyn in a quiet, sterile waiting room, her eyes swollen from uncontrollable crying. Her younger children clung to her, their small bodies seeking a comfort she could barely offer in her own profound distress. Her voice was raspy, broken, thick with grief, but she spoke, recounting fragmented memories of Arthur's life. A real farm boy, always had that stubborn independence, that quiet strength. Joined the U.S. Army fresh out of high school. Served with quiet dedication, built himself up from nothing. She spoke of his early life, painting a portrait of humble beginnings, a strong work ethic, and steady ambition. Later, Arthur worked for a major telecommunications company, built a good, stable career. Amira would add, later, expanding on her father's quiet resolve and dedication. My dad was a workaholic, always striving to support my mom and us 5 kids. Always providing for the family, no matter what. Was a man who tried his absolute hardest to carve out an honest living, to provide for his complex, blended family, and to keep his children on track, especially in an area like Viridian Heights which, despite its pockets of suburban peace, was sometimes fraught with perilous influences and rising rates of youth-related crime. He was, fundamentally, a protector, a provider, a strong, if sometimes gruff presence. Majorly protective, Amira emphasized, her eyes flashing with a clear, vivid memory of her father's fierce care and unwavering principles. My dad did not like any use of drugs. Absolutely not. Marijuana was not something he was okay with having in the house, or anywhere around us kids. He always kept a very strict line, a no-tolerance policy. This detail resonated sharply with the marijuana-filled backpack found concealed in the backyard, forming a potent point of potential conflict and contention within the household. Arthur Caldwell was a man who would undoubtedly have confronted his son about finding such an item. Evelyn, what can you tell us about your relationship with Arthur? I asked gently, navigating the delicate space between professional inquiry and profound human empathy, and the family dynamic, particularly with all 5 children in the household. They had 3 girls in common, Clara, Mia, and Chloe. And then, from a previous marriage, Arthur had his oldest son, Felix, who was now 20. There was also a little boy, Finn, about 6 or 7 at the time, whose parentage was more complicated, as we would later learn. A complex, intricate web of familial relationships, ripe for internal conflicts, unspoken resentments, and hidden tensions. Her answer to the state of their marriage, however, was startling, delivered with a brittle, almost desperate honesty that cut through the polite veneer of grief. Arthur and we were having serious marital problems, very serious. She admitted, with a sigh of weary resignation, that they were deeply estranged, sleeping in separate rooms, simply due to the financial impracticality of splitting up, while still needing to support so many children under one roof. "I hate to say this," she began, her voice brittle with bitterness, a sharp edge of resentment overriding her grief, "but he was just not a great husband. He really wasn't." Evelyn then launched into a narrative that painstakingly painted Arthur as a lech, constantly cheating on her, emotionally unavailable, with all these women on the side, always talking to them, sending them messages. She characterized him as manipulative, selfish, driving her to emotional despair with his supposed infidelities and disregard. This, predictably, immediately raised a significant eyebrow from both Elena and myself. A cheating husband. If true, it opened a new door of possibilities. A crime of passion, a scorned lover seeking revenge, or even a desperate wife pushed beyond her limits. But the framing of Olin as the grieving, wronged victim, rather than a potentially complicit party, felt almost too convenient, too neatly packaged. My instincts prickled. After taking a formal, detailed statement from Evelyn Albright, Elena and I moved to Felix Caldwell, the 21-year-old son, Arthur's elder. Felix was a slight, unassuming young man, almost physically unremarkable, dressed in casual clothes, rarely making direct eye contact, his body language suggesting a profound lack of self-confidence, a quiet diffidence that bordered on outright evasion. My immediate impression was that he wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, a seemingly harmless, if somewhat withdrawn, young man easily overlooked. He did not, at first glance, appear capable of cold-blooded murder. "Felix, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us during such a difficult time for your family," Elena began, aiming for a gentle, reassuring tone, seeking to build a fragile rapport. "Whatever you need to tell us, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, could be helpful. Just be honest. It's incriminating contents, the marijuana and pipe," Felix immediately admitted, almost without prompting, a nervous twitch in his eye, a faint blush creeping up his pale cheeks. "Yeah, I smoke marijuana. I usually keep my stuff outside the house, in that backpack, hidden, so I don't have a confrontation with my dad. He hated it." He confessed to a strained relationship with Arthur, filled with constant arguments and criticisms, especially about his life choices, but insisted he got along much better with Evelyn, whom he viewed as far more understanding and lenient. "Any debts? Any trouble with suppliers?" I asked, looking for any specific link to violence, or a dangerous drug debt that might explain the shooting. "No, Sergeant, not at all," he stammered, shaking his head rapidly, almost frantically. "I don't deal, I don't owe, never." His marijuana use, by his own accounts, seemed low-level. It didn't feel like a deep enough connection to violent, high-stakes criminal activity that would explain a targeted murder. "So, Felix, can you tell us in detail what you were up to this afternoon, on June 25th, from, say, noon onwards?" Elena asked, steering the conversation to the critical time frame of Arthur's shooting. He provided a fairly innocuous account, a portrait of a typical young man's Saturday. He claimed he was at his best friend Owen's house, just a few blocks down the street, from around noon onwards. He claimed he had been there with two buddies, Owen and Sam, for the entire afternoon. However, he admitted he had left for a short period of time, around 8 p.m., to return the family car. "Arthur," he explained, "would get really upset when I drove at night without asking permission, or if I stayed out too late, so I had to bring the car back home before he noticed." "Did you see your dad when you brought the car back, Felix?" Elena pressed, observing his face intently, searching for any subtle cues. "No," Felix said, quickly, perhaps too quickly, his eyes darting to the floor. "Definitely not. I parked a block away, on Willow Street, and then walked directly back to Owen's house, because I knew that if Dad saw me, especially so late, he would have made me come into the house right then and there, and I wouldn't have been allowed to go back out to play video games with my friends for the rest of the night. He was strict about that." "I get that, Felix," I said, with a quiet nod, a subtle attempt at establishing a fragile rapport. "My old man was strict too, back in the day. Perfectly understandable. We'll let you go on and get out of here for now." I concluded the interview, allowing him to believe he had provided a credible, if slightly evasive, account. We had, by all appearances, failed to get anywhere concrete with the family regarding the shooting itself. Evelyn had her narrative of Arthur's a convenient outwardly facing story, but her alibi appeared ironclad. Felix's low-level drug use and seemingly casual, if slightly convenient, alibi seemed harmless enough, too pedestrian to link to such a violent act. We needed a new direction, a different set of eyes, a more objective, silent witness. We would go back outside, to the watchful, ever-present eyes of the neighborhood cameras. They were our next best, most reliable bet. Chapter 9: The $1 Million Motive. Back in the familiar, hushed comfort of the precinct, the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the unfolding domestic tragedy. Elena and I embarked on the meticulous process of canvassing the wider neighborhood around Arthur Caldwell's home on Cedarwood Drive. Officer Miller had left detailed notes from his preliminary survey, and I followed up on every lead, every potential point of surveillance, meticulously searching for additional cameras. Each doorbell camera, each unassuming security system, represented a potential silent witness, a digital sentinel that could break the case wide open. Spectral shadows across manicured lawns and neat driveways. I found a few more homes that appeared to have active video surveillance systems. When I spotted a camera, I would methodically stop, jot down my name and number on a crisp business card, and tuck it securely onto the doorframe. Please call me at your earliest convenience. We are investigating a serious incident at 1754 Cedarwood Drive, and would appreciate reviewing any relevant security footage from the evening of date. From time to time, a standard, local courtesy for a serious crime, designed to maximize cooperation. The following day, a major breakthrough, a piece of irrefutable, hard science, arrived from the State Forensics Lab. The ballistic report for the recovered Sluga misshapen fragment pulled from Arthur's shirt by Officer Miller was finally ready. I took the call from Dr. Elena Vargas, the chief ballistics technician, a familiar voice of precision and calm. Sergeant Corbin, we got really lucky here, Dr. Vargas began, her voice betraying a hint of excitement, a rare emotion from the stoic scientist. The projectile is a .22 caliber long rifle round, exactly as Detective Vargas initially estimated from the TV hit at the scene, and our expert analysis. Comparing the unique striations and microscopic landing groove marks on the deformed bullet has been able to link it to a very specific, very unusual gun, an H&R 999 revolver. My brow furrowed, a sense of eerie recognition from an old-timer like myself. An H&R model 999. That's an antiquated piece, isn't it? Haven't seen one in a long time. And from no other gun of that caliber. From millions of possibilities down to one distinct model. A true breakthrough. Interesting was an understatement. To have the specific make and model of the murder weapon, particularly such a rare and antiquated firearm, was an incredible stroke of investigative luck. It wasn't a common choice for a modern crime, which meant tracing it could be harder due to its age and the difficulty in tracking older sales. But also, if found, it would be almost definitive in linking it to the perpetrator. The specificity of the weapon provided an unexpected, concrete lead, an almost palpable target. As I pondered this new, chilling development, the specific, deadly weapon now a spectral presence in my mind, another call came in, this time from St. Jude's Medical Center. Her voice was cautious, deliberately lowered, laced with discernible concern, a hint of something deeper she was struggling to articulate. Detective Corbin, I need to share something with you, confidentially, about the Caldwell family, Ms. Davina began, her hesitation palpable, her usual professional reserve replaced by a profound unease. Specifically, the exact value of the payout, the clauses, the timing of claims, even the process of obtaining death certificates. My attention sharpened instantly, a cold knot forming in my stomach, confirming a nascent suspicion. Evelyn's carefully constructed narrative of the grieving wronged wife, already flimsy, began to tear apart at the seams. Ms. Davina, what kind of value are we talking about here? Is it a standard policy? I asked, my voice controlled, betraying nothing of the internal alarm bells ringing loudly. The policy, she informed me, her voice dropping to a near whisper, heavy with implication, has a very significant value, a full $1 million. A chill that had nothing to do with the precinct's efficient air conditioning system ran down my spine, cold and swift, $1 million. That figure, cold and stark, immediately illuminated a new, powerful motive, a potential abyss of greed. That, unequivocally, gave someone 1,000,000 compelling reasons to remove Mr. Caldwell from this mortal coil. It dramatically transformed Evelyn Albright from a supposedly grieving, wronged wife into a woman with a profound, undeniable financial incentive for her husband's brutal demise. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into a far more sinister pattern. This conversation, stark and profoundly unsettling, prompted an immediate, more intensive deep dive into the true, complicated lives of Evelyn and Arthur. I recalled Evelyn's initial narrative during our first interview, where she painstakingly painted Arthur as a lech, a philanderer, an emotionally unavailable husband, perpetually engaging in all these women on the side, always talking to them, sending them messages. It was time to look much closer at that self-serving claim, and, more importantly, at her own carefully hidden, duplicitous life. A longtime colleague of Arthur's from the telecommunications company, a man who had known Arthur for years, through thick and thin, Silas proved to be a wealth of information, a clear, unbiased voice that systematically, brutally, shattered Evelyn's carefully constructed image of victim. Arthur was a truly good man, Miles, Silas began, his voice laced with genuine sorrow and a profound sense of lingering injustice. A little naive, perhaps, sometimes far too trusting, too forgiving, but fundamentally good-hearted, decent to a fault, always a little too willing to give Evelyn the benefit of the doubt, to overlook her obvious transgressions, to forgive her inexcusable behavior. Marcus then began to unravel a horrifying story of systemic betrayal and calculated manipulation that turned, exposing the cynical depths of her character. Evelyn, or Viviana, as she often went by years ago, Silas revealed, his voice laced with palpable bitterness. She's been financially bleeding Arthur dry for the better part of 10 years, since they first got together, covertly manipulating every financial situation in their lives to her own significant advantage, always prioritizing her own desires and material needs above his, or the children's very real needs. She's had numerous, open affairs with other men, openly flaunting them, even produced a child, Finn, with another man, which Arthur, in his boundless generosity, eventually raised as his own. The words painted a truly sickening portrait of sustained, calculated abuse. And despite all of this, all her betrayal and financial ruin, Arthur was still supporting her, paying all of her significant bills. Quite the opposite. Evelyn's initial portrayal of Arthur as a lech, a faithless cad, was now revealed as a masterful psychological projection, a cynical, deliberate attempt to divert suspicion from her own profound guilt and manipulative self-serving nature. I slammed my fist softly on the desk, the pieces finally starting to coalesce into a sinister, horrifyingly coherent picture. Yeah, I murmured, my voice grim, heavy with grim realization. Her facade is crumbling. But the most gut-wrenching moment of all arrived 2 days later, on June 30th. The medical staff in the ICU ward, after extensive neurological tests, exhaustive consultations, and agonizing discussions with the family, officially informed them that Arthur Caldwell was effectively, medically, brain dead. His brilliant, complex mind, destroyed by a single .22 caliber bullet, was beyond repair, beyond hope of recovery. His body, kept alive by sophisticated machines and artificial respiration, had reached its inevitable. The grim decision of ending life support now fell to Evelyn Albright, as his legal next of kin. Amira Caldwell, Arthur's oldest daughter. She claimed, she told us, I am racking my brain on what to do. This is so hard. But then she just turned to my youngest sister, Clara, and said, Sweetie, it's time. He wouldn't want to suffer anymore. And so my mom signed the papers to pull the plug, with hardly any hesitation. Evelyn Albright, fully aware of the true medical prognosis, made the ultimate decision to end Arthur Caldwell's life support. Legally, she was entirely within her rights. It was, ostensibly, an act of mercy to stop his prolonged, agonizing suffering. But for a homicide detective, the chilling question gnawed at me with an insidious insistence. Was she truly motivated by compassion, by an end to his suffering, or by the cold, calculating allure of $1 million suddenly, irrevocably, and swiftly, in her future? For a calculating, manipulative mind like hers, these motivations were not mutually exclusive. Indeed, they could very well intertwine perfectly. I brought Evelyn back into the precinct for a third, far more intensive interview, The quiet room suddenly heavy with unspoken accusation. Her carefully constructed edifice of lies now thoroughly exposed. At that point, I reflected to a lot in this murder. I confronted her, delicately at first, then more directly, about the $1 million life insurance policy, about the specific nature of her and Arthur's fractured relationship as described by Marcus Thorne. Her face a carefully constructed mask of injured innocence, a performance designed to deflect. I didn't do anything to Arthur. He was a difficult man. But now, knowing what I knew, what we all knew, they rang utterly hollow, pathetic in their transparency. We now have a warrant, and we're simply looking for any and all evidence that might shed light on this murder. Beyond what you might want to share with us, helpful wife, actively pushing away any implication of guilt from herself. We took her phone, excusing her from the room, promising to return it shortly after a full forensic imaging. Instantly, Elena hit pay dirt, confirming earlier suspicions. "Here, Sergeant Corbin," Elena murmured, her finger scrolling on the digital imaging console, her face a grim mask. "She's having an affair, a very explicit one it seems." The messages were sexually explicit, undeniable proof of Evelyn's chronic infidelity, corroborating Marcus Thorne's testimony. It powerfully established her character, however, and further undermined her initial credibility beyond repair. Then, Elena, with her property crime expertise lending a keen intuition for uncovering hidden digital trails, navigated purposefully to the phone's internet search history. A piece of wisdom gleaned from countless hours in interrogation rooms. As I now explain to you, it's a profound... Elena's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in grim recognition and profound unease. She simply stared at the screen, mouth slightly agape. "Sergeant Corbin, look at this." Dozens upon dozens of frantic, meticulously time-stamped searches populated the screen. Life insurance payout if murder by spouse, and countless variations on the theme. These searches, meticulously time-stamped, dated back approximately 3 weeks before Arthur was shot. A clear, undeniable, and extremely strong interest in the substantial sum of money tied directly to Arthur's death. Not just a casual interest, but a detailed, anxious, methodical financial investigation into her potential windfall. It now unequivocally starts to look like Evelyn had a very strong, very explicit, financial motive to be, if not directly involved in, then certainly complicit in, or at the very least, intimately aware of a concrete plan for this murder. I stated, the words a grim, chilling realization. Her protestations of innocence now completely crumbled into blatant, undeniable deception, her true nature finally exposed. The undeniable strength of Evelyn's physical alibi. When asked where she was on the day Arthur was shot, she had provided irrefutable receipts from various stores, witness confirmations from multiple, independent sources, and verifiable locations via passive cell tower data from her phone, which tracked her movements precisely. She had been with her younger children, Clara and Leo. There's simply no way, in any sense of the imagination, I conceded to Elena, that she could have physically pulled the trigger that pointed to a revolver herself. Unless she's got an identical twin running around somewhere, a physical impossibility. The implication, horrifying yet logically unavoidable given the confluence of her powerful motive and her watertight alibi, hung heavy in the precinct air. Someone else was in on it, a co-conspirator. My mind spun through the possibilities. Like one of the guys she's seen on the side, perhaps one of her lovers, bribed by the promise of a cut of the $1 million insurance policy. Maybe, but even more disturbing. My gaze drifted, with a dawning, terrible premonition, to the physical file on Felix Caldwell. Elena understood immediately, the same grim thought forming in her mind. But who would ultimately benefit most from such a large insurance payout? She mused aloud, vocalizing the chilling thought, her voice barely a whisper. Besides the estranged wife, the children. She looked at me, a profound, dawning horror in her eyes, articulating my silent dread. That killer instinct in him, from what we observed in the interviews, he was weak, not strong. He had presented as shy, easily intimidated, rather than menacing or violent. Yet, the idea, once planted, refused to die, blossoming into a profoundly disturbing, deeply sickening possibility. Elena and I discussed that there could be a dark, utterly unimaginable scenario. I acknowledged, my voice grim, heavy with the weight of burgeoning truth, in which Evelyn Albright and Felix Caldwell had, in some capacity directly or indirectly, worked together on this. A monstrous, unholy pact, fueled by insatiable greed and something else equally twisted, something far more sinister than simple financial gain. The threads of the family, already frayed, were about to unravel completely, revealing a horrifying, unseen connection between stepmother and stepson. So what's really going on here, Felix? We were about to uncover the full, terrifying truth. A truth that would expose the deepest, most depraved secrets of the Caldwell household. Chapter 10. The interview room was the same. Small, sterile, cold, a perfect crucible for extracting truth. He still exuded that same unassuming, almost childlike demeanor, a carefully maintained facade of harmless diffidence. But this time, under the quiet, persistent pressure of Elena's pointed, began to fissure into outright, catastrophic collapse. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with unspoken accusation. Felix, we just want to go over what you were doing the night your father was murdered. With a bit more precision, Elena began, her tone soft, almost sympathetic, yet underscored by an surgical firmness. She leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle. We've had some inconsistencies emerge since we last spoke, Felix, and we genuinely need your help to reconcile them. Just tell us the truth, the whole truth. The problems started almost immediately. During his first interview, Felix had given a mostly coherent, if brief and vaguely described, timeline of his evening. Now, desperate to escape the tightening noose of our scrutiny, to avoid confronting the monstrous truth, he began adding convoluted, patently fabricated details, desperately attempting to bolster the flimsy, collapsing elements of his purported whereabouts. I definitely remember I went to the Omni-Mart, just down the street, after I dropped the card off, he mumbled, stubbornly avoiding direct eye contact. His gaze fixed on a scuff mark on the sterile floor, as if it held the answer. Let him dig his grave, allow him to weave a tangled web until he inevitably tripped. A huge box of condoms. Yeah, I really needed those. Detective. Definitely. Very essential. His voice was barely a whisper, imbued with a pathetic, feigned earnestness, utterly devoid of any genuine conviction. Elena and I exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance. A shared moment of professional disbelief. Had been found deliberately abandoned and concealed in the backyard of his home. So then the logical question is, Felix, how exactly are you going to pay for these essential condoms if you don't have any money on your person? Felix stammered, his carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble under the relentless weight of logical impossibility. He began sweating visibly. I just got a few bucks from, the couch cushions. Yeah, the couch cushions. Under the couch, earlier. His words trailed off, his face flushing crimson, betraying the desperate, frantic improvisation of a cornered man. This was it. When you start making changes, my boy, I knew, with a certainty honed by decades of detective work. You're digging yourself a deeper and deeper grave with every word. Lies multiply. Truth simplifies. It was a classic tell, a clear sign of a narrative constructed from fragile deceit. This patient, meticulous, chipping away, this relentless pursuit of inconsistencies, was a cornerstone of my interview tactics. I would not leave a subject alone if I sensed a lie, not until the truth, however ugly, began to reveal itself. Then, out of nowhere, almost as a desperate, by the grocery aisle, near the front. Elena's head snapped up, especially if it contains incriminating data. It ends up in these kiosks for quick, untraceable cash. His casual, almost throwaway mention of it was a seismic, irreparable mistake. Why would you randomly, Felix, specifically say that you exited the store on the side that has the Kronos kiosk at it? I asked, leaning forward, my voice losing all trace of its earlier gentleness. Felix shifted uncomfortably in his seat, rubbing his palms against his worn jeans, desperately avoiding eye contact. He was cornered, trapped in the inexorable web of his own lies. I just stopped there for a few things. Just to check it out. Curiosity. He stammered, clinging to his increasingly fragile narrative with diminishing conviction. Elena chimed in, her voice now sharp, cutting through his flimsy explanations with surgical precision. Out of a cell phone machine, perhaps? Is that how you bought those condoms you claim you needed so desperately? The look on his face, in that precise moment, was etched with pure, unadulterated terror, stripped bare of all pretense. Suddenly realizing its every escape route was severed, every path blocked. Panic flared in his eyes, vivid and unmistakable, making them wide and My suspicion, which had been steadily mounting, solidified into unshakable, absolute certainty. He lost his phone. It was patently absurd. And if he lost it, why mention the kiosk? What if he needed to lose that phone? What if its contents were incriminating, catastrophic to his carefully constructed innocence? What better place to dispose of it, anonymously, for quick, untraceable cash, than a Kronos kiosk? Undeniable chance to verify it with irrefutable digital proof. Felix, I said, my voice now low, gravely serious, no room for ambiguity, the words imbued with the full weight of the law. If we find out you're lying to us about this, and we have a very strong feeling you are, things are going to get very, very bad for you. Significantly worse than they are now. Understand? I nodded subtly to Officer Miller, who was patiently waiting by the door, having returned from his neighborhood canvass. Officer, show Mr. Caldwell out. He's free to leave. For now. Felix stumbled out of the interview room, a ghost of a young man, believing his pathetic lies had bought him precious, fleeting freedom. We now had a thoroughly confused, patently altered alibi for the son. Undeniable million-dollar motive, buttressed by a series of damning, meticulously time-stamped cell phone searches. The complex, horrifyingly tangled web of familial betrayal began to take its final, monstrous shape, converging on the one person who could tie it all together. But my immediate, laser-like focus, my overriding priority, was now squarely on that Kronos kiosk. That machine, I knew, held the definitive, unyielding key to unlocking the full truth. Elena, with her property crime expertise, she understood the intricate mechanics of these automated machines, how they operated, how they stored data. There are all these little hidden cameras all over the thing. Sergeant, she explained with renewed, almost breathless enthusiasm, her face alight with professional excitement. They take multiple pictures of you, high-definition video of you, throughout the entirety of your transaction, for security and fraud prevention purposes. It's a literal goldmine of evidence if the timing is right. Elena, with a quiet urgency that belied the building anticipation. To our immense relief, they were incredibly cooperative, understanding implicitly the gravity of the homicide investigation and the need for speed. We reviewed the tape, our eyes fixed, unblinking, on the screen in the dimly lit digital forensics lab. And there he was, clear as day, Felix. It was approximately 5 or 6 hours before his father got murdered. Felix stood nervously before the kiosk, his face illuminated by its blue glow, undeniable proof of his lie. He's at the kiosk, selling this phone that he specifically said doesn't exist. An amount that seemed almost ridiculously insignificant compared to the monstrous crime we now knew he had committed. That was the undeniable, earth-shattering moment, a profound jolt of discovery, a surge of exhilaration, sharp and cold, mixed with a profound sense of grim satisfaction, washed over us. Felix Caldwell is a liar, Elena, and we now have irrefutable video proof of that, backed up by physical records, I said, the words heavy with the ultimate implication. Why is he lying? Because that phone, Elena, is going to tell us precisely why he's lying, what dark secrets he truly holds, what drove him to this unspeakable act. We didn't waste a second. We immediately obtained a legal warrant to access the Kronos kiosk itself, not just its surveillance footage and transaction records, but the physical contents. Elena and I raced back to the apex mark. The kiosk, glowing with its unblinking blue light under the harsh fluorescent glare of the grocery store, an unwitting, silent accomplice to a dark transaction. Wouldn't it be nice? As they say in the old song, Elena, I murmured, a rare, almost grim smile gracing my lips, the phrase echoing from some distant memory. To find Felix's phone in that very machine, after all this work, had provided Elena with a secret sequence of buttons to press, a kind of hidden master key for technicians, obscured almost imperceptibly around its facade. We have just like a mountain of cell phones down here, Elena explained, pulling out a fresh pair of forensic gloves. Sergeant, but we'd have to be absolutely It's in here. I watched a knot of nervous anticipation, a cold, clinical dread forming in my stomach. Minutes crawled by, each discarded phone a miniature disappointment, each an item of someone else's life. Then, Elena let out a small, triumphant gasp, her professionalism momentarily overwhelmed by the adrenaline of discovery, her voice a sharp exhalation. Here we go, Sergeant. That's it. The exact make and model we identified from the transaction data. This has to be it. She carefully held up a sleek, black smartphone, its screen dark, its digital secrets still hidden, locked away. A hard-won victory in a bleak landscape. Clutched securely in a sealed evidence bag. Back at the precinct, in the secure digital forensics lab, she performed her magic. Digital forensics, and uncovering hidden digital pathways. She carefully connected the recovered device to our specialized forensic software, initiating the meticulous, intricate data extraction process. Our software was cutting-edge state-of-the-art, designed to bypass passwords, app data, images, metadata. It would, effectively, expose the device's entire digital history, every secret it held, every thought that had driven Felix Caldwell. This was it. The final, definitive key to Felix Caldwell's monstrous crime, a direct window into his twisted mind. The very first keyword search, Elena typed in, leveraging the earlier ballistic reports that had so astonished us, was simply .22 long rifle, bullet Harrington Richardson 999 revolver. Endless cascade across the screen. Elena leaned back slowly in her chair, a grim, knowing smile spreading across her face. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of revulsion and cold triumph, met mine, confirming the horrific truth, illuminating the full extent of the digital depravity, the horrifying culmination of weeks of secret planning. Check this out, Sergeant Corbin. This is what he was doing in his free time. Felix Caldwell, the unassuming, seemingly dim-witted kid, had been obsessively researching his father's murder weapon. Sergeant, Felix Caldwell is relentlessly searching for Harrington and Richardson .2, two revolvers in gun auction sites. Elena explained, scrolling rapidly through the damning data. It wasn't just that Felix was casually searching about guns, or just searching about ammo. 4 weeks, Felix Caldwell was exhaustively searching for information about the exact ammo type, the ballistic properties of that small caliber, the specific serial numbers he found for sale, and the precise